Thank you for coming. I will be presenting a project called Cabaret Crusades. Cabaret Crusades is a project based on the chronicles of the Crusades history that lasted between 1095 and 1291. The project started on January 2010 and it's expected to be completed by September 2013. Actually, I had to change the plan because it's basically 4 parts and I finished one part of this project and I was supposed to start last January on the second part, and I was supposed to present what I started already in January, but of course because of what happened in Egypt I had to postpone everything, and hopefully we'll be continuing mid of April. So it's a project that contains videos, installations, drawings and objects, but mainly I will be speaking about the films. It's a series that consists of 4 parts. The first part that I will be describing more today, it's called Cabaret Crusades, the horror show file, that was produced in June 2010, and it's based on the chronicles of the first Crusades that lasted only 4 years, from 1096 to 1099. The second part that I will be starting in April, it's called Cabaret Crusades, the Path to Cairo, and it's focusing on the historical period that it's between 1100 and 1169. I called it the Path to Cairo since it's this period in the history. It was the preparation for the political force to be moving to Cairo. In the first part, which is called the horror show file, we see the main power was in Constantinople, and of course many other cities are also sharing this power from the Arab side, such as Antioch, Edessa, and in between a place like Jerusalem was the final destination, of course. In the second part, although we don't really see the power happening in Cairo, but it was all the preparation for this movement, and we see more scenography and more scenes that are happening in places like Mosul or Damascus, Aleppo, but as I said, it's all preparation to be going to Cairo. So when I say 1100 till 1169, because in 1069 that was the invading, actually that was when Nuruddin Zinc entered Cairo, and that was a turning point also, because starting from this point Cairo will be Sunnah again instead of being Shia. So in that case, in the third part, I will be, that it's called Cabaret Crusades, the Secrets of Karbala, will be focusing more on this relationship between the Sunnah and Shia in the Middle East during that time, during this period. In the third part, we will see more scenes from Cairo and Jerusalem, and also Hittin, of course. Finally, the last part, which is called Cabaret Crusades, I called it simply the victory. We'll be focusing on the period between 1187 to 1291, starting from the siege of Jerusalem and capturing Jerusalem, of course, by Salah ad-Din, and going through many events, maybe that goes to up to 100 years, and this is capturing Accra by Al-Ashraf Khalil from Egypt. That was in 1291. I think the last part, I'm expecting that the last part will be about 4 hours film. The first part was only half an hour, and of course it's very important to say I'm an artist. So for me, it's more like translating this history into visual art. It's not really trying to make archive from this history, but it's more like trying to read a different point of view from the history, and this is based on this book that I read by Amin Malouf. I think maybe I will just show some examples from the first part, just images, and I will read a bit about the first part that it's already done. So some of these images are just showing portraits of the marionette, and I show these portraits as photographs in the exhibitions, and some other scenes are showing still images of the film itself, and I will be just reading some part about this finished part. Cabaret Crusades, the horror show file, offers a view on the history of the Crusades, retracing events that unfolded over a period of 4 years, from 1096 to 1099, and played a key role in subsequent historical developments, shaking to the core the Arab world and its relations with the West. The film is a translation of causes and effects, religiously sanctioned military campaigns in the form of images based on a reconstruction of events seen through the eyes of those who had to confront the invasion. It provides a precise description of the places in the Middle East and Europe that formed the backdrop for the early Crusades. To bring these episodes alive, the production uses highly expressive 200-year-old marionettes from the Lupi collection in Turin. This gem of local Piedmontese tradition is perfectly suited for a contemporary and international reinterpretation of events. The marionettes are moved by clearly visible strings and don the costumes of the characters who were present in the Christian armies of Europe and in the Muslim armies during the conflicts. Though the subject is based on historical documents and facts, what emerges is a surreal and mythical atmosphere that blends drama and cynicism, telling a story of remote events that could hardly be more topical today. The main source of inspiration for this work is The Crusades Through the Arab Eyes by Amin Maalouf, written in 1986 and thus long before today's hatred. The book by Maalouf, a Lebanese who lives in France, re-examines the history of the Crusades by going back to Arab historians and their writings, most of which have never been taken into consideration in the West. Though he does also turn to some of the most acknowledged Western sources and studies, the historical picture that emerges is at once powerful and level-headed, political and unbiased. The essay gives some insight into the historical cruelties perpetrated in the name of a vague feeling of religious humiliation, but more objectively, one that was carried out for complex socioeconomic reasons, the most important of which was reaction against the misery and desperation caused by the plague that struck the lands of the Byzantine Empire between 541 and 543 AC. Accustomed as we are to seeing the Crusades as glorious race to free Jerusalem in the name of God, we will be astonished by the events that actually took place. The aim was not the liberation of the Holy Sepulchre, but conquest of the lands that had formerly been part of the Roman Empire, where for centuries the Catholic Church attempted to exert its control. This was to be the conquest of people and economic resources for a Europe that was barely managing to survive. Thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Hi. What I don't know if this is a question or an observation, but I think what really struck me about this work and your previous work on the Nasser assassination is, just one piece, but is something, and the fact that you call yourself an artist and not a historian, is that how certain artists, like certain filmmakers at least, like Antonioni or even the Thanis, for example, how their chronicling of history, their looking at history, sort of brings to the forefront not just people who have been omitted, but objects, places, things, objects mainly. And the famine, the reaction to the famine as being a narrative that is almost always missing in accounts of the Crusades. Mm-hmm. And so my question is, then would you still be sort of, or not just a question, but I guess an observation, isn't it all right then to be called a historian or an artist historian who sort of understands the limitations of being just a chronicler, sort of surmounting it and understanding things like, for example, when Antonioni is looking at post-war Europe, he understands things like boredom, fragility, and your Nasser death retelling looks at again fragility, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Things that cannot be accommodated in normal historical narratives.
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand very well, but anyway, I don't believe in history that much. I don't know. I mean, I believe my role is more like, just seeing a historical event, for example, trying to put it in a different form from what we already know, And maybe by shifting this aspect of seeing things, for example, Tilimach Sadat, the one you're talking about, which is the assassination of Sadat, by shifting this way of seeing things, maybe in that case we can realize something else. But I'm not saying that I have the truth by, for example, by finding Amin Ma'louf, because Amin Ma'louf is a point of view anyway. And I think I'm very interested about this form of transition. Maybe I can give a different example, which is a work called Asphalt Quarter that I showed in Venice Biennale in 2003. Asphalt Quarter is based on a work by a Saudi-Iraqi novelist, Abdurrahman Munir, the novel that's called Cities of Salt. So the first chapter of his novel is speaking about the beginning of Saudi Arabia and discovering the oil in Saudi Arabia and the relationship between the oil